Hi, so yeah, thanks for inviting us along. So we're just going to try and do about 10 trends in about 6 minutes 40, so here goes. Culture label, dead simple idea. I mean, it was about bringing things together and making them much easier for consumers to find. So our day job is, like I said, cultural entrepreneurs, web entrepreneurs, and we built a site about 4 years ago that brings a lot of really cool organisations together, so it makes it much easier for consumers. But what we're really passionate about is that space, so this crossover between culture, technology and entrepreneurship. So last year we did an event in London with Google and Bloomberg, which was all about bringing together 50 people from lots of different sectors to actually debate the future of the cultural sector and how we can work together to come up with new business models. That's, for us, is a really, really kind of key thing. So people like Spotify and all kinds of people.
So the question for us is, what is cultural entrepreneurship? And this is where we wrote the book Intelligent Naivety. Really, it comes down to three fundamental principles. Firstly, the idea of business models can be really created by bringing the best of culture and commerce together in very creative and intelligent ways. Secondly, looking at everything through the eyes of the consumer. How do we insert what we do as organisations into the everyday lifestyles of people? And then thirdly, looking at building something from nothing, the essence of entrepreneurship. How do we create something and access new resources, remove barriers to innovation?
Okay, so what is a cultural entrepreneur? So the first one that we're going to talk about in a second is a guy called Chris Wilde. And Chris is a really interesting chap. He's known as the Retronaut. He basically is an archivist by background. He came up with the site idea, which is just about allowing people to basically access archive images in a totally new way. So it's a really simple idea. Once a day, he curates a time capsule, sends images to his followers, and over 1 million of them now tune in each month. And it's basically reinventing the way that we sort of view archives. What's fascinating, did it all on WordPress, very little money involved. He's the kind of classic entrepreneur who basically is about kind of bootstrapping. So it shows you can have big ideas, you don't necessarily need huge resources. And on the back of that, actually, he's now been able to secure VC funding because he's managed to blend this mix of culture and commercial as well. Chris Wilde, and it's retronaut.com. Don't go on it, you'll get utterly addicted. So. From the other end of the scale, if we're looking in terms of, rather than starting with a small amount of resource, what we're seeing is there are businesses which are very much based around culture, which are also securing large venture capital investments. So, that ranges from people like here, such as Sedition, which is the image on the left-hand side, and they're trying to find out, is there a market for digital art in the same way as the offline art world works, which is a really interesting idea. And that's an investment, obviously, in the kind of millions to pull off something of that scale. And on the right-hand side, you've got TouchPress, so the people behind Bjork's recent app album and also things like Elements and Wonders of the Solar System, working with Faber, really historical archive to bring alive the wasteland, really challenging text, but within 6 weeks had managed to recover the initial investment on it. So again, not necessarily the blockbuster hits.
So I think, as we've all realised, technology is fundamentally disrupting many business models in the cultural sector, and it means kind of looking at what we do in very new and interesting ways. One of our most recent clients, the Library of Birmingham, is a good example of this. It's a £200 million capital project building the biggest public library in Europe, and they were basically going to shift the books from one building to a new building. And so we got involved with them to explore, actually, what is the new competitive landscape for public libraries? What does it mean when you've got people like Amazon Kindle allowing free book sharing, or when you've got something like Goodreads.com around building and sharing communities of book lovers, or when you've even got something like Meetup.com or even Starbucks as a place to go and access free Wi-Fi.
You've stolen my side, Simon.
Some good challenges.
So if we're coming up with these new ideas. How do we support the growth of these businesses or these cultural organisations? And one of the things we explored at REMIX was to bring a lot of venture capitalists to the table. We had people from Google Campus, which is a new startup space in London, and the founder of Seed Camp, which is very much one of those sort of Silicon Valley-style incubator spaces. And we were looking at, does that sort of support for an emerging business or emerging idea translate to the cultural sector? And I think it absolutely does. So the space on the right is something called Watershed, which you might know in Bristol. And for many years, it's been a hothouse for creators, but they're now adding scarily, the lawyers, the finance people, and other people into the mix, the funding, to say, actually, can we still scale some of these ideas to a different sort of level than before? Another area which is a really interesting trend, particularly around technology, is almost the evolution of sponsorship into something called, what I see is almost kind of co-production. So this is where you've got organisations like Sony, for example, and it's a slightly older example on the left here, working on the PlayStation series. But when they worked with those partners, they very much invited them into Sony to understand what Sony was about, what new technologies they were developing, what their issues were as a business, getting really, really close, and then co-producing an idea from that, the absolute opposite of the old-fashioned sort of sponsorship model. You've seen that again with something like the Intel Creators Project or Intel's Remastered series, and Sony's latest thing here, working with Punch Drunk, who've taken New York by storm, where they basically brought alive Resistance 3, which was one of their recent PlayStation 3 games under the arches of London Bridge. Another trend, passion brands. So passion brands are really interesting because that's culture for me. That's what we're about. You know, if you look at something like Tate Modern, built for 2 million people, you know, regularly sort of 5 million plus people are cramming into that space. So consumers are really getting culture. And if you look at this example here, totally different sector, it's called Brewdog. And if you ever wanted to own shares in a brewery, this is how you do it. You know, part of the craft beer movement had a strong, small but loyal following. And actually they said, okay, we need money to expand. Let's put it out to our community. When they turned off the tap on their website, over £2 million had been donated by their, their followers, and who literally did want to own shares in a brewery. And that gave them the money to expand their business to the next level. And it was all about sort of passion branding.
And I think if we've got a very strong proposition, a very strong brand and what we stand for, whether that's an exhibition or whether that's a whole organisation, if we start with that and then from design point of view, actually look across multiple platforms and telling our story across more than one medium by design. So some examples coming out, some interesting ones coming from Film 4.0, a Channel 4 initiative, looking at multi-platform at the design stage across things like gaming, and also transmedia shows like Defiance in the US around TV, multiplayer gaming, apps. In the sector, we've got Mona doing some very interesting things in Australia with Wi-Fi triangulation, not just to add extra layers to the interpretation, but really enhancing the pre- and post-visit in an interesting way.
The other one there was Donate, which was about tapping into the passion of the physical visit.
So whilst it's good for organisations to build their own expertise, it's equally useful to leverage other organisations and really use the power of the network. In our case, it's an expertise around e-commerce, but other examples like digital theatre are really, really exciting, creating Netflix of theatre productions with an expertise in filming live theatre as ex-BBC employees. VC funded, so great scale around marketing and how they get that message out to mainstream society, really allowing for economies of scale across technology, marketing, as well as centralised aggregation of specialism and expertise.
So I think we just about got our 10 trends in. If you didn't hear them all, if you go to the Guardian's website and you can download the REMIX publication for absolutely for free, as you can the Intelligent Naivety one as well. So just go to culturelabel.com/remix. Thanks.